So here is our algorithm. The important thing in a program is the algorithm. Once you have the algorithm correct, coding is no big deal. So the idea is to make sure that your algorithm is correct, copy it into your program, and then you don't think about the algorithm anymore. You merely code the various steps. So over here, let's just verify that our algorithm is correct. So we've got output and what happens internally. We're going to create the board. So internally, we do something like this. This is creating the board. We do this thing. We put some numbers in there. Done deal. Board is created. I'm not going to write all the numbers. We've created the board. Then we have to display it. So in our output, whoops, we're going to display it. I don't need to make this perfect. You got the idea here. We display it. Then I set my token to X. So over here, I have a token, and I am going to make it X. Now I'm going to loop, so I'm going to do something at most 9 times, but I'm going to get out of the loop if someone wins. So if I knew I was going to go through this a fixed number of times, I would use a for loop. But so I'm not going to use a for loop, so I know I have 2 options, a while or a do while. Do I want to go through this loop at least 1 time? And I believe the answer is yes. I have to loop. I have to do something at least once. So I could use a do while. I could also use a do, but you know, let's try a do while. So what am I looping? I'm going to ask some player. So let me get rid of that because that won't be my output. I'll stick it over here. I'm going to do a do while. I'm just decided on that. I'm going to ask somebody, so I'm going to prompt. Now, who do I ask? Do I say X or do I say O? And this is where students tend to get into a mess. You know, is it X? Is it O? Is it? The easiest thing to say is it's token. So I'm going to ask token, whatever the value of token is, for the place. This is the place where they put their X or their O. Okay, so now I'm done that. I need to internally, so now I need to get it. So I need to input my place, which means I forgot to say it over here, so that, you know, my algorithm over here was not okay. I'm having trouble editing this thing. Okay, I need to input, so let's not forget, I need to input. Internally, I need to put it in the right place. So if the person gave me a 5, I need to put it, well, let me say 4, it's easier to write. I need to put it in the right place. So if it was a 4 here, I put my X here. So I need to put it in the right place and then display the board. So the board is like this with an X in here. Now I need to check if 1, well, you know what? You can't win when you've only got 1 X on the board. So let's think about this. Do you want to check if you've won every time. I think in order to win, you have to have, let's imagine you an X and an O and an X and an O and an X. I think this is the first time you can win. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 5th time through the loop. So it seems like you can only, it doesn't make sense to check. So if, I don't know, K is bigger than 2, 3, 4, 4. And what is K? K is the number of times through the loop. So that means that somewhere up here, we had to set some value I don't know whether it's a 0 or a 1 at this point. Let's make it a 1. And then let's not forget to increment it at the bottom of our loop. Okay, so if I set K is 1, if K is bigger than 4, I check who won, or check if somebody won. K is not bigger than 4, it's only 1 here. Change my token, so it was an X, it now becomes O. This is the bottom of my loop, so this is where I say while what? While K is less than, I don't know, is it less than 9 or less than or equal to 9? I'll let you figure that out. And we need to know if somebody won, so let's make a Boolean. So we said here we'll probably make this a, am I still, yeah. Set some Boolean 1 to be false. And we're going to loop while K is less than something or other and 1 is false. So as long as somebody didn't win, you keep on looping, or when you've got your maximum, you know, when it's a draw, you get out of there. So I'm thinking that we got it right now. So we're up to looking here, check if 1, change the token, fine. K, I had a K which was initially 1, I change it to 2. I check here, have I had the maximum K? No. Looks good. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this again, but when you figure out, when you find that you missed some steps and you then fix it up, you should then go through it again and make sure that it works. But I don't want to spend that much time right now. I'm hopeful that this works. And I'm trying to see if this will allow me to copy so far. So far the answer is no. Let's see if it will allow me to copy. We'll worry about copying in a minute. What I wanted to show you here, I went back to TicTacToe. No, we'll worry about copying now. See if it'll paste. Yes, okay. And I'm going to take what I just copied in and comment it out. And remember that if I go up to this menu bar here, the second from the right will comment it all out. The reason I've commented it out is because I want to, before I delete it, look at this. All of this code here is actually this code here. I don't know why it's got an M in here. I think I just did it so that you could see. This code here is partially creating the board, and you have something similar. I'm going to get rid of this, but you need to copy yours. You have way more than this. This just puts blank spaces everywhere. You've got the ones with the lines. You did it already. You need all of that code to put into your method to create the board, and I'll show you that in a minute. The next thing you do is display the board. So let me take these lines here. So when you create the board, then your code in main, you're going to say, so it's a character array, two-dimensional, equals, and now you're going to, let's give it a name. And now you're going to call your method, which has no parameters, but it's going to return to you the board. So that method, no parameters, but it has a return type. So return type is a two-dimensional array of characters. So if we go to after the main, I was just checking that is the end of main. After main, public static. Now it's not void, its return type is a two-dimensional array of characters. It was called create board, and it has no parameters. And then the last thing it has to do, this is where your code goes that you already wrote. And then the thing you didn't already write, but the last thing you have to do is to return it. Whatever you call your two-dimensional array is the thing that you return. And even though it's a two-dimensional array, you don't put any square brackets there. You just say its name, and it will return it to main. So that's creating the board. Now you need to display it. So you need another method here, print board, which you will use many times in this program. A print method doesn't return anything, so I'm not putting it in an assignment statement, but it does need some information. It needs the board that it's going to print. So again, public static. Now, is it going to return anything? No. Void. What's its name? Print board. It has a parameter, and it's a two-dimensional array. I can call it anything I want. I'm just going to call it A for the sake of it here. And this is where you put your code to print that two-dimensional array. It's probably a nested loop, nested for loops, two for loops, one nested within the other, and you just go along all 17 rows and all 17 columns, printing it out. So you've done that before. You put your code in here and there's no return because the return type is void. It's actually here. Okay, what I can do is I can get this. I can stick it in here. I have to declare row and column. I said I called it not board but A. Doesn't matter what you call it, and that should print it out. So again, using the code you had before from when you didn't have methods. Okay, set token to X. This is an easy fix. I'll just do this one. It's a character. Set K to 1, set Boolean 1 to false. You can, so literally without thinking through your algorithm, just code every line. Set the Boolean to false. I don't have to even worry about why I need that Boolean at this time. This loop happened to be a do while. And where's the end of my loop here? While K is something or other. I'll put like 99 in here. You know that's wrong. And 1 is false. Another way of saying that is 1 is false, or you can say not 1. So either one of those is the same thing. When you get out of this, you need to figure out why you came out of this loop. So if 1 was true, if you got out of this because 1 was true, so if 1 was true, then you congratulate who? You have to think about this, because I don't think it's token. I think it was the one before, because you just changed your token at the end. You checked if you won, but you don't get out of the loop until you hit the while, and that's after you've changed the token. So if your 1 was true, and another way of saying that is if 1 then we want another if. So if, I need to comment it out, if token is X, then print O1, else print X1. It's the other one because you just changed it right here. I think the other way you could do it, maybe make life a little bit easier, is to change at the top of your loop And if you're going to change it at the top of your loop, maybe you want to start your token out at O and then immediately change it at the top of your loop. So you're not changing it after you've checked who won, so you don't have to go through this miserable thing here, because whoever won is still the value of token. Because you didn't change it yet, you're changing it at the top of your loop. Maybe that makes life a little easier programming wise. And if one is not true, then it was a draw. The thing that might bother you in this loop is you're asking your user where to place your token. And how do you take this in? Is it a string or is it an integer? And the temptation is to say it's an integer. I'll take a 5. I'll take something in. Maybe it's a 5. And then you have to figure out where it goes on the board. Which is fine. You can have a switch statement, and you can, if it's a 1, you can figure out the row and column. So, you could have, so if your case is a 1, then you might want to say board, and I can't remember the rows and the columns. I'm thinking it might be an 8. Let's imagine it's an 8, row 8, column 8 equals token. You don't have to worry about whether it's an X or a Y or an O. It's just the token. And then case 2 is something else. You could certainly do that. And that's taking it in as an integer. If you take it in as a string, then you have to get the character from that string. So then it's maybe a character 1. But then you can do a doubly nested loop, and you can look for the character 1 and replace, when you find it, replace the character 1 with the token. So a couple of ways of doing that, of placing the token. But you need a method to place the token. So let's go back to our program here. So we're going to ask the player where to place the token, and then you're going to have to call a method which presumably returns a board, because you got your board all fixed up now. I don't care what you call it, I'm just calling it place token. Let's think what it needs. It needs the board. It needs to know the token, because it's going to have to place an X or a O. And it's going to need the place where the person wants to put it. So you get your board, you get your token, you figure out, you've asked your user and you've taken in your input, so you know what the value of place is. Whether it's a string or an int is up to you. So you need to write this method, which takes all of that information and gives you back a new board. And the new board is the board that was before, but with the new information on it. And then you print it. So now you've got your new board appearing on your screen. Okay, so if you've been through it if you've been through this loop enough times that somebody could have won, then we need to check if won. So how do we check if won? We need a method to do that. And that method needs to return a Boolean. So it'll return true or false. That'll change the value of 1 if somebody won. So how do we check if won? Well, we're going to need a board. And I think that's all it needs, really. It's going to look at the board and figure out if somebody won. And if somebody won, then it'll return a Boolean, so 1 becomes maybe true. It started life at false, maybe it becomes true. And then this we've talked about before. You might want to change your token down here. You might want to change it at the top of your loop so that if somebody wins, you got the right X or O. You don't have to fiddle with that here, down here. Checking if won, students sometimes, let me just move this up a bit. How do you know if somebody won? Well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 possibilities. And you don't, so some students say, okay, we won if this is X and this is X and this is X. So they'll check if this position is X and this position is X and this position is X, 1 is true. And then they'll do it all again for O's. If this position is an O and this is an O and this is an O, 1 is true. You don't actually have to go through that. All you need to know is if the character in this position is the same as the character in this position is the same as the character in this position. And again, I can't remember these row numbers. I'm thinking that this column might be 8. But don't forget, you can't say if X equals Y equals Z. You can't do that. You're going to have to say if X equals Y and Y equals Z, whatever X, Y, and Z are. So in this case, X is something like board 8, 8. So it's not pleasant, but you don't have to do it twice, once for the X's and once for the O's. You just need to know if this character is the same as this character and this character is the same as this character. And then you do it this column, row, 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 and then the diagonals. So you will start out your method with 1 equals false. You will go into some ifs and you will return the value of your Boolean. You can call your Boolean something else, it doesn't matter. But with these ifs, if this is true and this is true, then you make your Boolean true, but you don't say else, because if you do say else, then on your next pass through here, when you're looking at something else, you'll keep on resetting your Booleans. You only want to reset your Boolean one time, which is when you find that something is the same. that somebody actually won. So start out with it false, reset it if somebody won, and then return the value at the end, which will either be the value it started with, or it will be true if you found that somebody actually won. This is a lot to take in, which is why I said that I would record this and put it in the module for you. But I do want you to see, actually I did want to model for you how I program. Start out with an algorithm, put the algorithm in comments in your program, and then just, you know, just code the lines. You don't have to think about your algorithm anymore once you have it correct. And the reason I say that is because often students then, in the coding, they try to think through their algorithm, and then they mess up the algorithm while they're coding. So try to do just one good thing at a time. Get your algorithm right, put it in your program, code line by line. You should be fine.